Today we're going to save Call of Dragons. And okay, maybe that's a little bit clickbaity, but if we look at what this game was based on, that's Rise of Kingdoms, it's really unusual that the predecessor to a new game outperforms the new game. And yet when we look in the App Store, we see that Rise of Kingdoms outperforms Call of Dragons in terms of how well it's ranked and how many people are downloading it. But wait a minute. Call of Dragons is actually like a way more fun and sophisticated game in terms of the open field fighting. The combat is just, for the most part, better. So why would this game be performing worse? Well, stick around in this video for my thoughts on the things that the developers can do to dramatically shift the experience of playing Call of Dragons for the better. And we got a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and I have spent over 5 years building this YouTube channel off of the predecessor to Call of Dragons, and that game is called Rise of Kingdoms. And when I compare these games, I've often said that Rise of Kingdoms is kind of like checkers in terms of its complexity, and Call of Dragons is kind of like chess. That's not to say that checkers is a bad game. I really like checkers. At least, I really like Rise of Kingdoms field fighting and gameplay right now, more than what I'm experiencing in Call of Dragons, which is really weird because at the beginning of my experience in Call of Dragons, I was constantly praising how this game solved so many basic Rise of Kingdoms problems, and we knew we'd never have them in Call of Dragons. But here we are with a different set of issues that have arrived that I think really need to be addressed for this game to achieve its potential. So I'm going to go step by step through each of these things, and, look, these are my opinion, but also I've talked to a bunch of people, and I am not alone in feeling the way I feel about some of these things. So the first thing we're going to talk about is going to be the betrayal meta. Now look, it's no secret that not only were we betrayed by the Dragon Fam in the last season, but we were betrayed this season by the Seals and MILF group, and I suppose it was really obvious they would betray. Like, literally, their leadership switch sides like every time there was a different winner each season. So without getting into those details, I mean, like, well, actually I will. When we were losing season 1, their leader switched over to the Dragon Fam. When we won the end of season 1, they switched back over to our fam. When we lost after season 2, now we're in season 3, they switched back over to the Dragon Fam. So they're just going back and forth all over the place, right? But the point here is that the betrayal meta in this game is insane. And it is the meta. And I called it the betrayal meta when I was talking about how we were betrayed in a way that ruined the season for everybody. And, that might sound dramatic. It isn't. It's what happened. So what is this betrayal meta in Call of Dragons that's ruining the experience? And it's so easy to understand. Let me explain. Rise of Kingdoms, the predecessor to this game, is a community game that has war. But Call of Dragons is a war game with temporary short-term communities. And this one distinction in the game design, and this is the game design, is dramatically hurting, in my opinion, Call of Dragons' ability to be the game that I think it will ultimately become, which is why I'm still here. Call of Dragons, as of right now, you have no kingdom identity, and alliances are literally destroyed each season. Your alliance is destroyed. Start all over. Communities are nuked. So, like, there is no permanent identity in this game for your community in the same way that there is in Rise of Kingdoms. And if there's any one thing you take away from this video, it is that these war games are not actually war games. They are community games with war. And the second that the game focuses too much on the war and not enough on the community, then you have huge problems, which is, in my experience, the issue that I've had actually every single season that I've played this game. Okay? So now you may be thinking, okay, well, I mean, come on, like how bad is this really? And I think the alliances resetting each season is something that we can talk about just for a minute here, which is that, okay, your leaders in this game do an astronomical amount of work for your alliances. And they are like the weapon for community engagement, where the game developers don't pay them, but my gosh, they do a lot of work, right? It's these officers that put in the work, okay? They are the organizers for their communities. They make it fun. The reason that communities I think succeed or fail falls very much onto these officers. But these officers have a lot to do that they don't have to do in Rise of Kingdoms. First of all, you have to re-recruit for your team every season. That's a lot of work that adds no value to the player experience. Re-recruiting is not adding value. It's double work, right? The next thing is that you have to filter players through a bunch of shells at the start of the season. Remember, when you start a season, your alliance starts with a lower member capacity. This creates hundreds of hours of work that is completely no value add to the player base. So this is a mechanism that is not only undermining community, but adding work that adds no value. And then lastly, you don't have diplomatic efforts with like your kingdom with 2 or 3 other kingdoms. You have diplomatic endeavors with dozens and dozens of alliances and leaders. And those leaders, because there's so much other stuff going on that these leaders have to do, there's a lot of switching up of who's the officer anyways and who's the leader anyway. So you have to manage dozens of relationships, and it's important that you manage them. I'm going to get to this in a minute. So there's all this work and effort that goes into Call of Dragons that adds no value. And so it's a tragic misallocation of the leader's time on the part of the players that have to do these things that the game design sort of forces them to do. Now, I will make some suggestions that I think are actually very simple that will fix these issues. But I see that as just a huge obstacle to communities that are healthy and thriving forming in this game. But the most important thing with regard to the betrayal meta is that not only are your leaders stretched incredibly thin, but at the end of the day, you can just switch sides whenever you want. The game design literally rewards you. Big rewards for being a traitor. If you are flexible with your morality, if you are flexible with who you play with, if you actually do not form community, then you could just join whichever side is winning. They'll probably take you, and then you just get better rewards. Now, this is a huge problem. This is a catastrophic problem, undermining many things, but also I have to say that game betrayals are the most negative experiences of my life. They're on par with like feeling like you have catastrophically failed at something you have done. Like if you've ever made a huge mistake in your life and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Being betrayed by somebody else feels that way. It's disgusting. It's unpleasant. And it's a mix of emotions that honestly, I'm better. My life is better for not having these emotions. Okay. So like right now, the game rewards people for being these sorts of traitors rather than being loyal. And that I think is hugely undermining the experience of the game. And this is actually some basic human psychology that we need to talk about. And there's a couple things that I'm suggesting should not be in the game. That includes the ability to resurge and the ability to switch alliances. I'll cover that more in depth. I think switching alliances within your starting zone is fine, but switching to an enemy team is not fine. And the reason is actually very, very simple. In human psychology, there was a study done, I remember this from college very vividly, where they gave a bunch of college students posters. And it was free. Hey, pick a poster for free. And then there were 2 groups of these students. Now, one group, they got to pick their poster and they kept it. And that was it. That was the whole thing. And then sometime down the road, they were asked, how happy were you with your choice? Now, there was a second group of college students, however, and that group of college students was given the opportunity to instead go and pick a different poster. So after some amount of time, they said, hey, we see you picked a poster. Do you want to pick a different one instead? And what they found is that the people who got to choose a different poster were less happy with their choices. I want you to understand this. The people who pick once and then never had a choice about what to do were happier than the people who got to choose again. So even though they might have actually picked something better, on average, they're less happy. How's this relevant? The ability to just pick a different alliance in this game when it suits you is a disaster, in my opinion, and needs to be removed immediately. I think that this undermines player happiness in very catastrophic ways. It's both disgusting to watch someone betray you. It is disgusting. I think it feels disgusting to be the person who is doing the betraying. All around, the betrayal meta of this game in my opinion, should be attacked by the developers at every opportunity. I even think that if they're going to leave that kind of stuff in the game, there needs to be a like really heavy traitor penalty buff that destroys you. But I actually think that's not healthy for the game either. So I think that the ability to betray in disgusting ways should be removed from the game entirely. Okay, so that is one aspect of the puzzle. The betrayal meta in this game, and I am speaking very cleanly, very clearly when I say it, it is the meta to be a traitor if you care about rewards over community. And a lot of people do. And that undermines all the people who are caring about community over rewards because those communities are impacted by all the traitors. Okay, so if you're on board for that, there's another thing that we need to talk about that I think with regard to the way fighting works in this game would be more fun if these things were changed. And I want to talk about this particular pass, and I might even put some footage up on the screen when we're rallying this pass. But there is a mechanic right now I covered in a separate video where you can get basically like bottomless merits by sending rallies at barb forts. But because rallies now defend themselves, you get absolutely wrecked if you're not paying attention. I think that basically any situation where one dumb player or inattentive player can screw over everybody else is really bad. Like when we think about voice chat, it's not good when like everybody's upset over somebody being stupid. Like why is it that the game design enables one person to ruin the fun for everybody else in a field fight? So why is this the case? Well, if you're AFK with your mage march over here, right, the opposing team is going to exploit and try to basically engage your march in combat. Your march does area of effect damage. They run their march back to their rally. Now you splash damage onto the rally, and the rally is hitting not only you, but it's blasting everybody around you. And it's just, it's exhausting. And it's dramatic. It's I don't know, the most unfun aspect of the field combat in this game. Like, before they made this rally change, I would have said that Call of Dragons combat is like leaps and bounds better than Rise of Kingdoms combat. But with the rallies working the way they do, I actually very much prefer Rise of Kingdoms combat to Call of Dragons combat, which is that's not good. So like, I really think that those rallies should be reverted to the way that they used to work, and they cannot defend themselves. I think that is a slam dunk choice. One AFK player should not ruin the experience of everybody who's being attentive. And one inexperienced or unknowledgeable or unskilled player should not ruin the experience of everybody else who is being attentive. And I honestly think the whole thing is actually just kind of an exploit, but whatever. So the rally meta, I think, is very addressable. And I hope the developers will just deal with that right away, because I actually can't believe it hasn't been hotfixed. The next thing is that when you zoom out, you see how these are white for enemies, or red if you're in a resource node. I guess they're red if they're attacking. And for friendlies, it's blue, right? Well, I think there needs to be an additional color. And that additional color, you can decide how it is that folks are grouped up such that they would be a different color. Whether it's, a part of an extended union or whatever, but people who you're allied with that are not a part of your union should be orange. And as I said, there shouldn't be situations where we're like yelling at each other in voice. And one of the situations where like people start to get really agitated is when someone is hitting an ally. Well, we have allies, right? Our friends in ANCS are allies, and they've been great allies all season. Okay. But like, they're not in a union with us, so their marches don't show up as orange, as I'm proposing they should. They show up as red or gray. And so people start attacking each other accidentally, and then they're all upset with each other. And it's like, man, it's just dumb, right? Like, we got yelled at constantly. When MILF was allies with us before they became traitors, that's also SEALs. They changed their name a bunch of times. Honestly, they like every week they changed their name. But those guys that were extreme traitors and betrayed us in the most vile and despicable way possible, they had one of their players just like really freaking out on our Discord server about having been attacked by our players by accident. And it's like, dude, you got to take it easy. But I also think the game design should eliminate these sorts of situations where, people are going to get mad at each other in unnecessary ways. Rise of Kingdoms already does this. If you click on an orange player, it says, whoa, are you sure you want to attack an ally? And like, although that pop-up is extremely annoying and slows the pace of combat, an elegant solution for that would be really nice. Like, I would like an option to toggle never attack an orange player. Easy, right? Easy. So something like that in this game would be huge. Okay, let's get to the next thing. And it's not a coincidence I have all these Darklings on the screen. I think that maintenance activities in this game are a little bit more time consuming than they ought to be. And by a little bit, I mean like they're way too time consuming. So every season, your heroes and their levels are reset. And every season, your artifacts and their levels are reset. And that's, I mean, it is what it is. And the developers have caught on that like, hey, wait a minute, players don't actually like that. So maybe we shouldn't hard reset everything to 0, which I think is great that they're looking at that. But there is an issue here, which is that the Darkling levels are all different. So, you know, here's a 19 and here's a 23. And the difference between a 23, okay, giving 21,000 experience, and a 19, 10,000 experience is massive. And in a game where hero levels reset and artifact levels reset, if you aren't killing the highest level Darklings, you are, strictly speaking, behind the players that are. So because in a season-based game, it's so critical you are attacking the highest level things, my suggestion for the game would be that it should move in the direction of increasing the level of everything, and everything lives at the highest level available. So in my opinion, every Darkling or Dark Creature in this zone should actually be level 25. And every Darkling and Dark Creature and pet in every zone should be the same level. And they all level up as the season progresses. So basically, you know, I remember playing Diablo, and it's like the forces of darkness grow stronger when another player joins the game. So like there's your lore, right? Like in the season chronicles, the forces of darkness grow stronger. Or like you send out a mail, or however you want to do it with the lore. Like the forces of darkness grow stronger, and globally all the Darkling and Dark Creature and Dark Pet levels are the same, and they go up. And that's it. Super easy. But I don't think that it's the right allocation of player time to be spending many hours kind of running around trying to find, you know, the highest level Dark Creature available, because strictly speaking, they will be at a disadvantage if they don't, and an advantage if they do. So the game design dictates that you spend time in a way that, like, I'm not sure is necessarily, even though I like, hey, look, I like the grind as much as the next person, I don't think walking around like that is adding a ton of value to the player experience. So that would be my approach for that. Now, the next thing we need to talk about is the feel bad of losing. And it is my opinion that in these city-based war games, you want to diminish as much as possible the feel bad of losing a season, because some number of people are like, F it, I'm just going to quit. This isn't fun for me anymore. That's true in Rise of Kingdoms, and that's also true here. But it's actually much worse in Call of Dragons than it is in Rise of Kingdoms. And I want to explain that actually for several minutes. First of all, losing is worse in this game because there is no home kingdom. So like you're stuck. And you're stuck with people you may, like, because of the betrayal meta, like my life would be better for never seeing these traders and our opponents that are literally in the same kingdom with us ever again. I want to explain that again so it's really clear. Never in my Rise of Kingdoms experience have I looked at large groups of people and said, my life would be better for never having to fight them ever again. But in this game, I actually feel like my life would be better for never encountering these humans ever again, that both betrayed us and also that are in our own kingdom. They also betrayed us. I guess that's why. But like, I think that's so important to understand that games like this, in my opinion, ought to orient around growing community, even community among teams that are rivals. Like in Rise of Kingdoms, I had rivals. For like years, I had rivals, okay? But never did I look at any of those rivals and say, my life would be better if I never fought you ever again. But here I am saying that. So I'm hammering this point because the seasons are too long, in my opinion. As soon as the dragon is captured, activity in this game falls off a cliff. I mean, it just plummets. Both in the winning team and in the losing team. It is just a dramatic drop-off in activity. And it's even more significant that even the winning team is like, yeah, I'm done now. I don't need to play very much anymore. So as soon as this dragon is captured, the season basically should be on its way to over. Like within 7 days of this dragon capture, the season should be over. But the way the game works today, I mean, we've been chilling for a week since the dragon got captured. We've got another 2 weeks, I think, on the cooldown of this over here. So at least 16 more days. And then there's going to be like a 5-day wind down period of the season and like a 3-day wind up period of the next season. But like, you're asking us to spend like 30 days as season losers, which like, that's probably not good, right? Like, and look, I love this game, and I'm trying to give like really, really constructive feedback on like, what would I change? I think seasons, boom, dragons captured, season's over. That's it. If you want to have something else to do, fine. You could have the magmas happen like, that should happen almost immediately after the dragon. It should be fast. It should be furious. There should not be a lot of time left for this to dwindle and for people to have to live with a bunch of players they may never, ever want to see again based off of the betrayal meta in this game, okay? And, you know, there's a bunch of other things that sort of feel bad. Like, so, you know, we've got another, I don't know, 25 days of living in our loss, right? You know, hey, you win some, you lose some, and it is what it is. And there's no shame to losing when, A, you're despicably betrayed, and B, the opposing team had literally billions of power more than we did to begin with, and billions of power in T5. So, like, there's literally no shame. Like, we fought, I think, as well as we could under the circumstances. But there's some things that sort of rub in the fact that you've lost, and that includes really low-level resource nodes. Like, you farm these in, like, 45 minutes. In Rise of Kingdoms, your home kingdom has level 5 and 6 nodes. These are level 3 and 4. Like, I think the resource nodes should be higher. As I mentioned, it would diminish the feel bad if the Darkling levels were higher. I think that's like a slam dunk, very easy choice to make. Okay. I feel like the time left in the season should be extremely short. And I think you should close the window for people invading your starting zone. So right now, the Dragon family is actively trying to invade our starting zone. And they are preying on our kindness toward other alliances with new players in it. Let me explain. The Dragon fam, and I have pictures of this, they're reaching out to the leaders of all the alliances in our starting zone. And they're like, hey, we'll give you endgame rewards if you give us your shell. It's easy. You just give us R5, or even just R4, or even just let us in. And we will give you dragon rewards at the end of the season. Come on in. We will reward you for your great contribution, right? It's the greatest scumbag activity, in my opinion. Second only to betrayal is like scumbagging your way into somebody's starting zone. But that's what you have to deal with right now. So we have all these things we're doing to try to mitigate the sort of punish of our letting other alliances be in a starting zone with us. So not only are the leaders of the game taxed with all this activity trying to diplo with like 500,000 different groups of people, but then if you aren't doing that, you could get catastrophically punished and your zone could get invaded. And then we have to live in this zone for another like 25 days where we're getting invaded. Like, it's really bad. So I actually reached out to the MF diplomatic contact. There were 2 of them. One of them said they quit. The other said they're not actually a diplomat, but that they would relay messages for me, which I really appreciate. Like, they had no obligation. They're not a diplomat. But I reached out to MF, who like obviously carried the season for the Dragon team. And I said, hey guys, like, could you reach out to them and say, maybe we don't invade starting zones? I don't know. It just seems like a completely unnecessary asshole thing to do, to go invade starting zones, especially the way that they're doing it, right? The game design does not intend you to invade starting zones, but the game design is fully being exploited to invade starting zones. So could you be the honorable ones and hold your partners accountable to a higher standard? And it's funny because I actually have multiple messages from players in the Dragon fam who are like, hey, really sorry about this additional season of betrayal. Like, I don't support what the people in MILF did. And it's actually surprising how many Dragon people are messaging me. So I feel like this is a case where a bunch of the Dragon fam members will be pretty upset to know the way that they're trying to invade our starting zone. And they just don't realize the sort of scummy things going on behind the scenes to really kind of screw my group over. But is what it is. I'm really not here to complain about my group getting screwed over potentially. I'm really pointing out that like the game design should not allow your starting zone to get invaded. I've got 2 more things I want to talk about, but if you've made it this far into the video, consider smashing that subscribe button and throwing a like on the vid. I'm not done yet, because let's talk about fair matchmaking. I mentioned that our opponents in this season had billions of power beyond us and billions of power of T5. And that is true. In fact, I have all that data. Like if somebody challenges on me, I literally have the history of all the data that I helped record around how much power they have and how many T5s they have and what is there across all the teams. But the point I'm trying to make is not to complain about this season. It's to sort of point out that, like, why does the game put us into a season where basically they just kind of like slop a bunch of players onto the map and they're like, you guys figure it out. And I think the game design should actually force fair matchmaking. And how do you do that? You look at player power and merits. And what I think the game design should be is that actually we go on an expedition together. You form an expedition team, which is 2 alliances, 1 union worth of players. Or an expedition team could be 2 unions worth of players, 4 alliances, whatever that is. You form an expedition team. However many players are designed to be on this in each of these starting zones. I'm sure the developers have a number, right? And you power balance each of the starting zones. So, we would have a Blood Family Expedition team. Dragon Family would have the Dragon Family Expedition team. MF would have their, MF Family Expedition team. And ANCS would have their, ANCS Family Expedition team. And these would all be like power balanced. Now, the reality is that if you were actually power balancing us, this map would have looked very different. Now, why is it that I think power balancing is so important? Well, first of all, you get better fights, way better fights if things are power balanced, right? So it's a more engaging player experience. It's a better community experience because now instead of like, there's really no community you're building in this game. Like you kind of have an alliance community and you kind of have a union maybe, but that's like all outside of the game constructs really to like maintain it. Because if people are from different servers, that community is destroyed at the end of the season and you have to kind of rebuild it. So like you sort of have like a sub community within your kingdom. And what I'm proposing is that you should be able to play with whoever you really want to play the game with, form an expedition team together, and then queue up to go on an expedition. And, I think that fits the game lore. You go to a new continent, you explore new things, and you slay new behemoths. Like, yeah, that's spot on, baby. So I think this idea of the expedition teams would be really, really good for the game, both to enable community and to power balance and have more engaging fights all season long. And I think that instead of a home kingdom, you should probably have like an expedition base of some kind where like as soon as the season is technically ended, okay, you should go back to your expedition base, which is kind of like your home kingdom, and you do stuff in your expedition base. This is just my opinion, okay? And the expedition base is where you live for sort of like the cooldown from the previous season and the warm up to the next season. I don't think you should live in that space for very long. I really do not. But I think that would maybe make sense and could be really cool if like your team kind of has your own space that you're customizing. I think that'd be cool, sort of customizing over time in some way, right? Like make that space yours. It's your expedition team. I don't know. I mean, you can let me know your thoughts down below in the comments if you think that's cool. But along with that, I think that means you remove the ability to resurge, right? So you power balance the zones, remove resurgence, you remove the ability to join any alliance from any zone, but you do make it so you can join any alliance that's from your zone, and you're off to the races. I think resurgence is not a great mechanic anyways, because like you gotta spend all those gems all over again. I don't know. The final thing I'll conclude on here is that with the game design as it is, there's not actually a safe way to build community. And that I think is what hurts the game the most. At the end of the day, in Rise of Kingdoms, you have a kingdom, and that is your community until you leave it and join another kingdom. In this game, you can join an alliance, but you may not even be able to migrate to the kingdom that alliance is from to play with them again. We had a ton of people that we built community with. We broke bread, baby. And like, then they just can't join our kingdom because we're full, and then we lose that community. And it's like, I think people play these games to be with other people. And I think that the Betrayal meta deeply undermines the ability to form lasting connections. And I think the sort of inability to have a safe space with which you can control who stays and who goes also really undermines the ability to build community. In Rise of Kingdoms, you have a king of the kingdom. You can control who's going in and out of the kingdom. That doesn't work in this game because like we're in a kingdom with a bunch of people that we don't want to be with, right? And like it's not fair they get to control it or that we get to control it. Like, and we can't even choose kind of where we want to go. Like, we can only migrate at the end of the season to one of the other kingdoms that is in, they're not even kingdoms, I shouldn't call them that, one of the other servers that's in our map, right? And by the way, the Blood family will be migrating. Like, that is happening. Details about that are going to follow. We've already kind of announced we're departing from the Dragon fam and that server. We have no interest in, I have no interest in seeing any of those players ever again, quite frankly. And, you know, there are some people who've sent me nice messages, actually. To say any of those players ever again is an overgeneralization, but, like, my life is not better for having known them, which is, I think, deeply untrue of my experience in Rise of Kingdoms. I mean, there are some individuals that were definitely jackasses, but, like, it's unusual for me to feel the way that I feel in this instance. And I think it's just this betrayal meta that I think the game should develop out. Design it out of the game. Shouldn't be here. And as soon as that's done, I think this game will really start to take off. As soon as this becomes a community game with war, I think it will become the game that it could be. But until that happens, I think that some of these mechanics that are here are just exhausting. My 2 cents. If you enjoyed the vid, throw a like on here and consider subscribing. I hope everything I said in here is perceived as just like being constructive and giving feedback on how I would improve the game. I spend an astronomical amount of time playing this game. I'm very passionate about it. So I hope that, like, pardon my passion for like really wanting this game to reach its full potential. I think it can. I trust the developers will get us there, which is why I'm still playing. And I can't wait till this season is over so we can focus on what's next. Until next time, my friends, you have fun smashing the kingdom. And if you want to see the ways in which we were betrayed, that I just think is really gross and is a part of the motivation for by making this video, cards will be in the end screen in just a second for 2 of those betrayals.